Parker Vance didn't think he just ran. 1 second, he was pushing a rusted stroller toward the crosswalk. The next, he saw a blur of red barreling down the road toward a little girl frozen mid-step. Without thinking, he lunged forward, yanking the child into his arms and twisting his body just in time to shield her from the front of the car. The bumper clipped his shoulder before the tires screeched and the world went silent. "Ma'am, ma'am," someone shouted in the chaos. Parker groaned as he rolled off the little girl, checking her over first. She was maybe 5, with tangled blonde curls and wide hazel eyes that were starting to fill with tears. She was shaking, but unharmed. "You okay, sweetheart?" he rasped. She nodded, lip trembling. "You saved me." "Where's your mom?" Before she could answer, a pair of designer heels clacked hard against the pavement. A woman's voice, sharp with panic, cut through the crowd. "Mila." The girl spun and launched into her mother's arms. Parker's head was still swimming, but when he looked up, his breath caught. The woman was stunning. Tall, poised, with sleek dark hair and a powerfully elegant presence. But her eyes were wild with fear and locked on her daughter like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Are you hurt?" the woman whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm okay," Mila sniffled, pointing toward Parker. "He saved me." The woman turned to him then, and Parker finally met her gaze. "Are you all right?" she asked, stepping closer, her voice softer now. "I'm fine," Parker muttered, trying to stand, but his shoulder screamed in protest. "You're not fine," she said firmly, reaching for his arm. "That car nearly hit you." "I've had worse," he said, brushing her off gently. "Just glad she's safe." "I'm Thea," she said, eyes searching his face. "Thea Hartley, and I don't even know how to thank you." "I'm Parker Vance." He winced as he stood fully. "And it's fine, really." She hesitated. "Can I at least drive you to the hospital or somewhere?" "You shouldn't be walking around like this." "I've got my son with me," he said, motioning to the stroller. "Can't just leave him." Thea looked down at the toddler inside. The boy, maybe 2, was blinking up at her with wide brown eyes and a juice-stained shirt. "What's his name?" "Max." She crouched down and smiled. "Hi, Max, you've got a very brave dad." Max just held out a cracker, Parker sighed. "Look, I appreciate it, but we're okay. I've got to get him home." "Where's home?" He looked away. "Not far." She didn't push, but she didn't back off either. "At least let me buy you dinner, something for what you did." He hesitated. Pride warred with practicality. His shoulder throbbed, and Max hadn't had a proper meal since breakfast. "Fine," he muttered, "but nothing fancy." She smiled. "Deal." Thea didn't take him to a diner. She took him to a high-end Italian place 10 blocks away, valet, candles, and a wine menu longer than a novel. Parker stood awkwardly at the entrance, holding Max on one hip and trying not to look like he didn't belong. She noticed. "You hate it," she said quietly as they waited for their table. "I just don't fit here." "You saved my daughter's life," she said, her voice low. "You belong wherever you want to be." Parker glanced at her. "You always eat like this," she shrugged. "Sometimes. I have a lot of business dinners." "What do you do?" "I run Hartley Ventures. Investments, real estate, that kind of thing." He blinked. "That's your name, the one on the building downtown," she nodded. "You're a billionaire," he blurted, too stunned to filter it. She laughed softly. "Technically." Parker looked down at his fraying hoodie. "Right, of course you are. But tonight I'm just a mom," she said, her eyes softening. "A mom who nearly lost her daughter and owes you more than I can ever repay." Max tapped Parker's cheek. "Hungry?" Thea smiled. "Let's get you both fed." Dinner was unexpectedly easy. Max devoured spaghetti like he hadn't eaten in days. Mila sat beside him, offering him bites of her breadsticks. Thea watched them, then Parker, her eyes lingering longer each time. "You're really good with him," she said when Max finally passed out in his seat. "He's my whole world," she nodded. "Mila's mine." "How do you do it?" he asked quietly. "Being a mom and running all that?" "I don't sleep much," she said, smiling, "but I've had help. Nannies, drivers, assistants. I can't afford a babysitter half the time." Her face fell slightly. "What do you do?" Construction, or I got laid off last month. Been picking up odd jobs, plumbing, repairs, whatever I can get. Must be hard. He met her eyes. It is. She didn't look away. You're doing a good job, he laughed once. No one said that to me in a long time. Well, it's true. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Finally, she said, let me help you. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's gratitude, and maybe. Her voice softened. Maybe something else. Parker's chest tightened. You don't know me. I know what kind of man throws himself in front of a car for a stranger's child. He didn't know what to say to that. She reached across the table, touching his hand. Just. Let me see you again, please. Parker looked at her, really looked at her. Not the polished billionaire, not the woman in heels and diamonds, just Thea, and for the first time in a long time, something inside him warmed. Okay, he said quietly. Yeah. I'd like that. Outside, she walked them to the corner. I'll call you, she said, hesitating. I don't have a phone right now, he admitted. Long story. She pulled a card from her purse, scribbled something on the back, and tucked it into his hand. Then you come to me. He looked down at her office, her cell number, her name in flawless script. Thea, he said slowly, testing it. She looked up at him. Parker. They stood there for a beat, neither moving. Then, impulsively, she leaned in and kissed his cheek. Thank you, she whispered, for saving my little girl. He watched her walk away, Mila's hand in hers, heels clicking softly against the pavement, and for the first time in months, Parker Vance felt like maybe, just maybe, his life was about to change. Parker stood outside the revolving glass doors of Hartley Ventures, his son balanced on one hip, a backpack slung over his shoulder. Max was clutching a plastic dinosaur in one hand and toying with the strap of Parker's work-worn jacket with the other. The boy's head drooped against his shoulder, already nodding off from the long walk across the city. He stared up at the towering building, its chrome and steel exterior reflecting the pale afternoon sun. The card she gave him was folded in his pocket, the ink slightly smudged from his fingers. He hadn't planned to come. But the fridge back home was nearly empty, and the landlord's final warning had been taped to the front door that morning like a slap across the face. Parker stepped inside, instantly aware of how much he didn't belong. The marble floors gleamed beneath his boots, and the scent of something clean and expensive hung in the air. Max stirred, restless. The receptionist lifted her head. Can I help you? I'm here to see Thea Hartley, Parker said, adjusting Max's weight. The woman blinked, her gaze flicking to the sleeping toddler. Do you have an appointment? No, she told me to come. The receptionist opened her mouth, likely to brush him off, but paused as her phone buzzed. She picked it up, listened, then looked back at Parker with a shift in her expression. She's expecting you. Top floor, elevator to the right. Parker nodded, though his stomach had twisted into a knot. The elevator was silent as it climbed, too sleek, too smooth like everything else in this building. When the doors opened, he was greeted by a wall of glass overlooking the skyline and a space so vast and modern, it looked like something out of a magazine. Thea stood near the window, on a call. She wore a navy blouse tucked into tailored pants, her hair pulled back into a low twist, a gold watch gleaming on her wrist. She caught sight of him and immediately ended the conversation, crossing the floor in long strides. You came. I wasn't sure I would. I'm glad you did. Max yawned against his chest, mumbling incoherently. Come sit, she said, motioning to a leather couch near the window. He looks exhausted. He is. I tried to find a sitter, but you don't need to explain, she said gently. Parker set Max down, letting him curl into the cushions with his dinosaur. Thea knelt beside the child, pulling a soft throw blanket from the back of the couch and tucking it around him. She did it without hesitation or discomfort, like it was second nature. I know this place is overwhelming, she said, standing again, but I meant what I said. I want to help. I'm not here for a handout, Parker replied, his voice low. I thought maybe there was something I could do, work-wise. Her expression didn't shift. There is, he blinked. You have a job for me. I have 10 properties undergoing renovations. My project manager's overloaded. I could use someone with your experience. You don't even know if I'm good at it. I know you risked your life for a stranger's kid without thinking twice. That tells me plenty. He crossed his arms. You're trusting a lot on instinct. I built everything I have on instinct. Parker looked out the window, the skyline stretching endlessly beyond the glass. You sure you want someone like me representing your company? I don't care what your bank account says. I care about your integrity. He exhaled slowly. What's the catch? No catch. I'll pay you fairly, full-time, benefits, and we'll figure something out for Max. He turned to her sharply. What do you mean? There's a daycare downstairs. Company run. You can drop him off before heading to your site. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, why are you doing all this? Because I can, and because I want to. That doesn't answer my question. She met his eyes. Maybe I just like you, Parker. That stunned him. You don't know me. Then maybe I want to. He could barely process the words. Every instinct told him this was too much, too fast, too unreal. But when he looked down at Max, still curled into the couch, and thought of the eviction notice waiting at home, he made a decision. When do I start? Tomorrow. 7 sharp. I'll text you the address. I still don't have a phone. She paused. Then walked to her desk, opened a drawer, and returned with a slim, unopened box. Take this. He stared at the brand-new device. You just have phones lying around? No, I had this one delivered this morning, for you. He shook his head, nearly speechless. You're unbelievable, she smiled faintly. You'll get used to it. As he left the office, Max still asleep in his arms, Parker's mind raced. He didn't know what this was or where it was going, but for the first time in a long time, he saw something ahead that didn't look like more struggle. And deep down, he couldn't ignore the way Thea had looked at him, not with pity, but with something else entirely. Something dangerous. Hope. The buzz of saws and the rhythmic thud of hammers echoed through the unfinished atrium of the luxury condo project on West Elm Street. Parker adjusted his hard hat, scanning the blueprint clipped to the side table while the foreman explained the day's goals. The air smelled of sawdust and fresh drywall, but beneath it, there was something else purpose. For the first time in a long while, Parker felt useful. He'd only been on the job 3 days, but the crew already respected him. He worked fast, clean, and didn't waste time talking. And unlike the others, he showed up at 7 sharp. Max fed and dropped off downstairs, his new phone tucked in his jacket pocket. The elevator dinged behind him. Parker glanced over his shoulder and froze. Thea stepped out, heels clicking softly against the unfinished marble floor. She wore dark jeans and a crisp white blouse, her hair loose for once, tumbling over her shoulders. The crew paused, straightening instinctively when they saw her. Miss Hartley, the foreman said, wiping his hands on his jeans. Didn't expect you today. I wanted to check progress myself, she said, but carry on, I'm just observing. She walked past them with an ease that suggested she'd done it 100 times, but her eyes lingered on Parker. He met her halfway, folding the blueprint and tucking it under his arm. Didn't think I'd see you here. I needed a reason to leave my office, she said. He gave a non-committal nod. You don't seem like someone who needs reasons. She stopped beside him, glancing over the banister to where the crew was installing the custom staircase. I wanted to see how you're doing. I'm doing the job you gave me. I'm not gonna let you down. She turned to look at him. I didn't ask that. I know, he said, quieter now, but I need this to work. Is it? He hesitated. It's a good job, pays more than I've ever made. Max is safe downstairs. It's more than I expected. But I don't get why you're asking. She stepped closer. Because I want to know how you're really doing. Not just the job, you. He didn't answer right away. I don't have the luxury of thinking about anything else. Her gaze dropped briefly. I didn't mean to push. You're not. I'm just not used to people asking. Thea folded her arms, surveying the open floor. You know, I designed this space myself. I wanted something that felt like air and light, something that gave people room to breathe. He looked around. Feels like a place no one like me would ever live in. Maybe that's why I built it, to prove that I could make something better than what I came from. He raised an eyebrow. You didn't grow up with this kind of money? Not even close, she said. My father ran a pawn shop in South Jersey. My mother cleaned houses. I built this life the hard way. Parker stared at her, surprised. You thought I just inherited it all? I didn't know what to think. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. I know how it feels to be invisible. To walk into a room and know people already decided who you are. That's every day. She touched his arm. Not with me. A call came through on her phone. She glanced at it and sighed. I have to head back. I wasn't supposed to leave the board meeting. You left a meeting to come here. I needed to see you. He swallowed hard. Thea, don't what? He looked away. Don't make this harder than it already is. She lowered her voice. Why is it hard? Because I don't belong in your world. And if I forget that for even a second, I'm the one who'll get hurt. You don't know that. I do, he said. I've seen what happens when people like me get too close to people like you. It never ends well. Her expression shifted, softening. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I just want to know you, the real you. He held her gaze, heart beating faster than he liked. You already know more than most. That's not enough for me. She walked away then, leaving him rooted to the floor with the echo of her words hanging between them. Later that evening, Parker picked up Max from the daycare and started toward the subway. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold. Max clutched his hand, chattering about the tower of blocks he'd built and the crackers he'd traded at snack time. They passed the same park they always did, but tonight, Parker stopped. Want to play for a bit, buddy? Max nodded eagerly, already racing toward the swings. Parker sat on the edge of the bench, watching his son kick higher into the air with every push. A woman across the park watched her child with the same guarded intensity. Parker's chest tightened. He thought of Thea's face in the construction site, the vulnerability she tried to mask. The way she looked at him like he wasn't just a name on a crew list. For a woman with everything, she carried the kind of loneliness he recognized too well. Max ran back, breathless. Daddy, look, I found a feather. Parker took it, brushing the dirt from its edge. That's a lucky one. Can I keep it? Of course. Max held it against his cheek. It's soft. Parker tucked it into his jacket pocket, then lifted Max into his arms. Let's go home. But as they walked, Parker couldn't shake the feeling that something inside him had shifted, that Thea wasn't just part of his new job or someone he owed. She was becoming something else entirely, and that scared him more than anything. Thea adjusted the cuff of Parker's blazer, fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary. You'll be fine, she said, stepping back to take in the full picture. It's just a gala, not a firing squad. I'm wearing clothes that cost more than my rent, Parker muttered, tugging at the collar. Pretty sure that makes it a firing squad. You're not paying for them, she said, retrieving her earrings from the vanity. And no one's going to question why you're here. You're with me. Parker glanced toward the mirror. The man staring back at him looked unfamiliar, clean-shaven, tailored, composed. He barely recognized himself. I don't want to embarrass you. You won't, she said, turning from the mirror. But if anyone tries to make you feel like you don't belong, let me handle it. And what if I want to handle it myself? Her expression shifted. Then I'll stand beside you. Their eyes held for a beat too long before Max's voice echoed from the hallway. Are we going to the party now? Parker relaxed visibly. Soon, buddy. You ready with Nora? Yeah. The boy called back from the guest room, where Thea's part-time housekeeper had arrived to watch him and Mila for the evening. Thea reached for her clutch. Let's go before you talk yourself out of it. The ballroom inside the Langston Hotel shimmered with golds and silvers. Crystal chandeliers dipped low over white linen tables, and champagne flowed like it was piped in through the walls. Parker tried not to gawk, but the ceiling alone looked like something out of a Renaissance painting. He followed Thea's lead, letting her navigate the sea of suits and diamonds. Guests turned to greet her with warm, practiced smiles, business partners, investors, city officials. She introduced Parker without flinching. "This is Parker Vance," she said to a steel-haired man in a velvet tuxedo. "He's managing the new West Elm development." The man extended a hand. "Big job." "I can handle it," Parker said tightly. Thea moved them along before the conversation could veer into territory he'd have to fake. At one point, she leaned in and whispered, "You're doing perfect." This perfect includes not breathing, apparently. She laughed softly, the sound warming his chest in a way that had nothing to do with the champagne. Later, under the soft lighting of the terrace, Parker stepped away from the crowd. The noise had started pressing in, and he needed air. The skyline stretched ahead of him, glittering like a promise he wasn't sure he believed in yet. He didn't hear Thea approach until her hand touched his. "Too much?" she asked. "I'm good, just needed a second." She leaned against the railing beside him. "You weren't wrong, you know, when you said this wasn't your world." "Thanks," he said dryly. "I meant, it shouldn't have to be. I spent a long time building walls like these, events like this. I thought if I got high enough, loud enough, polished enough, I'd outrun everything I used to be. And I still wake up some mornings and expect to see the ceiling of my childhood apartment." Parker glanced at her. "You don't seem like someone who doubts herself." "Only all the time," he paused. "Why me? You saved Mila. There are 100 men who would have done the same thing." "Maybe," she said, "but none of them held her like she was their own. None of them looked at me like I wasn't just another last name on a skyscraper." He exhaled. "You're impossible to shake, you know that?" "Good," she said softly, "because I'm not walking away." He turned to face her fully. "I've been on my own for a long time. Max is my only constant, and I'm not asking to change that. I'm asking to be part of it." He reached for her hand. "This doesn't feel real." "Then let's make it real." The music inside swelled. Thea hesitated, then held out her free hand. "Dance with me." "I don't know how. Neither do I." "Come on." He followed, letting her lead him back onto the marble floor. The crowd parted slightly, but she didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't care. She rested her hand on his chest, and he drew her close, their bodies fitting together like they'd done this 100 times before. Under the lights, surrounded by people who didn't know a thing about who he used to be, Parker let himself believe. That maybe this woman, this powerful, fearless, impossible woman had seen past the bruises, and the bills, and the nights spent pacing the floor holding a sick child. And maybe, just maybe, she loved what she saw. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the windows of Thea's apartment as Parker stood by the stove, flipping pancakes, while Max and Mila built a pillow fort in the living room. Thea walked in barefoot, a robe cinched around her waist, her hair messier than he'd ever seen it. "You cook too?" she asked, smiling. "I've had years of practice." She crossed the kitchen, pressing a kiss to his cheek. "You're stuck with us now, you know." "Good," he said, setting a plate on the table, "because I'm done running." She looked at him, eyes bright. "So am I." And as the kids laughed and the smell of syrup filled the air, Parker realized this wasn't a rescue. It wasn't a lucky break or a temporary escape. This was home. Parker stepped into the polished conference room, the sleeves of his button-down rolled just past his elbows, blueprints tucked under one arm. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city buzzed like a living organism, unaware of the moment about to unfold inside this room. Thea stood at the head of the table, surrounded by a panel of senior partners and developers. Her hair was swept up, her voice calm and assured as she outlined the final stages of the West Elm project. But as Parker entered, her eyes flicked to him and softened only for a moment, but enough to steady the nerves buzzing in his chest. He had been asked to present the finishing strategy for the project. Not because he was the safest choice, but because Thea had insisted on it. And in front of people who still raised eyebrows when they heard his name, he laid out the plan with clarity and precision honed from years of knowing how to make things stand without falling. When he finished, the room was quiet. Then one of the partners, a man with silver cufflinks and a reputation for blunt scrutiny, leaned forward. "You think this timeline is achievable?" Parker nodded once. Yes, because I'm not guessing. I've walked every floor, I've talked to every subcontractor. I know what they need, and I've built the schedule around what's actually possible, not what looks good on paper. The partner exchanged a glance with the others, then gave a small nod. All right, then. After the meeting, Parker joined Thea in her office, where she was peeling off her jacket. You didn't just hold your own, she said. You owned that room. I half expected someone to throw me out, he replied, setting down the blueprints. Thea poured 2 glasses of water and handed him one. They're going to have to get used to the idea that you're not going anywhere. He took a sip, then leaned against her desk. I've been thinking. That sounds serious? It is, he said. About Max, about everything. She set her glass down. What about it? I don't want him to grow up thinking life is about surviving one day at a time. I want him to see what it means to build something, to trust someone, to love without waiting for everything to fall apart. She stepped closer. And I want that with you. Her expression didn't shift right away. When it did, it was slow, certain. You already have it. Parker reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn velvet box. He didn't open it, yet just held it in his palm. I found this in a pawn shop last week, he said. It's not new, it's not perfect, but it reminded me of us. It survived things, and it's still standing. He opened it. Inside was a delicate gold band, understated but beautiful, with a single oval-cut diamond that glinted in the soft afternoon light. Thea didn't speak, but her eyes filled with quiet emotion. I want to marry you, he said. Not because I think I deserve you, but because I love you, and I want to spend every day proving that I can be the man who stands beside you, not behind you, with you. Her hand rose slowly to her mouth, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked overwhelmed. Then she laughed softly through the tears. You found the one ring in this city that's more stubborn than I am. Is that a yes? She reached for his hand. Yes. They didn't rush the wedding. They planned it for a Saturday morning in early autumn in a garden courtyard tucked behind Thea's favorite art museum. The guest list was small family, close friends, and a few members of the crew who had helped build the West Elm project, which had been completed ahead of schedule and sold out within days of opening. Mila wore a flower crown and carried a basket of petals that she insisted on tossing all at once. Max wore suspenders and a crooked little tie and spent the ceremony holding Parker's hand tightly, as if he knew the world was shifting beneath their feet. Thea walked down the aisle in a gown made of soft ivory silk. No veil, no train, just her. Radiant. Real. Parker could barely breathe when he saw her. Not because she looked perfect, but because she looked like everything he'd never had the courage to want until now. They exchanged vows beneath an arch draped in eucalyptus and white roses. No theatrics, no speeches. Just promises spoken softly, heard only by each other. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Thea didn't wait. She pulled him close and kissed him like she had nothing left to lose. Later, as the sun began to dip behind the buildings, Thea sat on a bench with Parker's blazer wrapped around her shoulders, barefoot and laughing while Max and Mila chased each other through the garden paths. Parker sat beside her, watching them. You ever think we'd end up here? No, she said, resting her head on his shoulder, but I stopped trying to predict anything the moment you walked into my life. He looked down at her. You regret it. She tilted her head up, eyes unwavering. I've never been more certain of anything. He kissed her forehead, then her mouth, slow and lingering. I love you, he said against her lips. She smiled. Then come home, husband, and so they did together. In the months that followed, they blended into a life neither of them had ever imagined. Morning chaos with cereal on the floor and mismatched shoes. Evenings filled with homework, bath time, and stolen kisses in the kitchen while pasta boiled on the stove. Parker took over more projects, and Thea stepped back just enough to breathe. They made time for each other, for their kids, for the quiet moments in between. No more running. No more surviving by inches, just love, steady and unshakable. And for Parker, Standing in the heart of a life he never thought he'd have. That was more than enough.